What up, what up? I'm Aaron Yara, and you're listening to the Effective Nerdcast. Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of the Effective Nerdcast. I hope everybody's doing well still. I know coronavirus is still in full force and full effect. I hope everybody's staying safe, staying healthy, taking care of yourself. I know I said it last week and the week before, but it's still true. I want everyone to make sure they're doing everything they can to stay healthy during this crazy time that we're going through at the moment. This week's episode is part 2 to last week's episode, where I go over search engine optimization. It was an episode that was requested by you, and if you haven't listened to part 1 yet, go back and do that. I give an overview of the SEO process. Today, what I want to get into is the things that you can be doing to improve your search engine optimization and just to improve your website and your online presence altogether. This is something that creators, especially artists, not digging on artists, but artists have a hard time doing this. A lot of people feel that their website is just kind of, they almost treat it like their social media page, where it's just there and they put stuff on it and they hope people go to it. And websites don't really work like that. You want it to kind of be your home base for your projects and for your art and for all that. However, you need to also run your web page in a way where it's going to be picked up by search engines, and that'll help you expand your audience because most people use search engines to find web pages. Today I'm going to go over all the different things that you need to get yourself set up and to hopefully increase your website traffic and bring in a whole new audience to your art or to your content. The first thing I want to go over are the basic tools that don't really fit into any of the other categories that we're going to talk about today, but they're tools that you just need in general in order to monitor your website and make sure that your website is functioning properly. The first one is Google Search Console. You can also use Bing Webmaster Tools if you want to try to increase your web traffic from Bing. However, most people use Google, so Google Search Console is going to be a very important tool for you. You can go to Google Search Console and sign up for free. They do require a verification method. It's usually by putting a snippet of code on your homepage in order for them to verify that you are in fact the owner of the website, or at least have access to edit said website. You can also submit your sitemap to Google Search Console and Bing Webmaster Tools, and that'll give the tool kind of an overview of how your website works. Your sitemap is kind of your structure of all your pages, and it's a kind of a feed of all the different pages on your website, and it really helps the tool pick up what your website's about. Google Search Console will give you a lot of information, not just traffic analytics, but it'll also kind of show you how you, like, what role you play in the search engine process. There's a lot of other great tools in there that'll tell you about different errors on your website or different things on your website that you may need to focus on. You can also request indexing on this. I know if you have a hard time getting a web page indexed, you can always submit the URL through Google Search Console, and then they'll review it and index it, as opposed to just waiting for a web crawler to come and index the page. Next is Google Analytics. This is a traffic analytics tool that is also ran by Google. Similar to Google Search Console, you can sign up for it and put a verification on your site in order to have Google Analytics pick up your website. This will show you different metrics about the traffic on your website. For example, it'll tell you how people came in, whether it was through Google search or through social media, or it'll tell you what pages are performing the best. And it's a really good way to kind of see how people are coming to your site, how many people are going to your site, and what kind of entryway they use. not everybody goes to your homepage when you first, or when you go to a website. Think of how many times you've Google searched something, say just even in the past week. You don't always land on the homepage. You usually land on the page that you're searching for. So using Google Analytics will show you how people are getting to your site and what page they're landing on when they come to your site. Another tool is Alexa. It's owned by Amazon, but it's not affiliated with the Amazon Alexa like smart home speaker. It's its own thing. There is a paid option for it, but there is a free tool, and you can also get it as a Google Chrome extension, but it'll show you the overall ranking in both your country and the whole world for your web page. Seeing what rank you are isn't really important because you're not really seeing where you fall with your competitors. Because, for example, if you think like the top 10 ranked web pages are like Google, Facebook, YouTube, and all those big companies, and then you think of every big corporation or every brand or everything that all the different stores you go to, their websites are all going to rank pretty high. So saying that like, oh, I want to be in the top 100 isn't really feasible, and it doesn't really mean anything because really what you want to be competing with are people who have similar web pages to you. Alexa is a great way to just kind of see that your website is kind of gaining momentum. I believe if your website ranks over, I think, 10 millionth worldwide, it just doesn't show any data. If your website isn't able to be pulled by Alexa, it probably means that you have some like SEO issues on your website or just some website issues. As you work on your website, you'll see your Alexa rankings grow. I personally don't use it to see that I'm better than most, I'm better than a lot of people, but I do check it just to see if I'm heading in the right direction. Because as I see my ranking grow, I kind of know that I'm doing something right. Especially in those very early stages where you go from having no data at all to having a ranking. Even if you're ranked in the 5 millionth, if you weren't ranked at all before, you know that you made some positive changes to your website. So it's not the best tool in the world, but it is kind of just kind of like a general guide to see where you're at and how you're growing. Next is HubSpot's website grader. This is a great tool. You put in the URL for your website and it gives you a breakdown of a lot of different things, such as SEO and site speed and crawling errors. It'll tell you a lot of information about your website and different things you can do to fix it up. I find that not just using one tool will give you everything. A lot of tools that say they do the same thing will give you much different results. So what I find is just periodically checking in on different tools that we have available to us will really kind of just help give you the scope of where you are with your website and how your website is growing and if it's performing correctly. So the first big topic I want to talk about today is page speed and site speed. When someone clicks on your website, it's pulling all this code off of wherever your website's hosted and pulling it to the person who wants to view your website, and it's building the website. You have all these different resources on your website, right? You have text, you have images, you have JavaScript, you have HTML code. There's a lot of different parts of a website under the hood, and how they get transmitted to your audience is a big part of the user experience. For each one of these categories, I should have said this previously, but for each one of these categories, I'm going to explain why it's good for your audience and why it's good for SEO. Because I know a lot of people think that SEO is like a algorithm kind of thing, and it is. But it's important to remember that on the other end of the algorithm, there are real people, and it is your audience. So even though you have all this data and all these metrics that you're looking at, it's really important to remember that at the other end of those metrics are real people, and are people that like your work and like your content, or people who don't know about your work and you want them to see your work. I mean, that's what building an audience is all about, right? So for site speed, it's good for your audience because your web page will load fast for them. Most people will click back on a web page if it takes, I think it was like more than 3 seconds to load. So you want your website loading as fast as possible. You do not want someone to click on a search result, going to your webpage, having the page take a long time to load, and before they even see anything on your website, they're hitting the back button. That's really bad. That kind of plays into how search engine optimization works as well, where if a search engine sees that people are clicking on your site and immediately clicking back, it sends them a signal that you probably don't have the best website in the world. Kind of what we talked about last episode, where most search engine optimization features or techniques really are about giving the people on your website the best experience possible. People who go to your website expect it to load fast, especially now when we have better mobile connections and faster internet. You're competing with other web pages that can load insanely fast. Especially being an indie creator, you may not be able to afford the best web hosting or like the best kind of paid tools that'll help your website run fast. So it's really important that you stay on top of your site speed, because you don't have as many tools available as a large corporation does. So just making sure that you stay on top of it and your website is really fast and running tight is important. However, here's kind of the caveat to that is site speed is a very fickle process, and people will pull their hair out trying to get their website to run fast. It can be really difficult, especially if your website has like a special type of coding, or if you run ads on your website, then the ads will typically slow down your website because the ads are being pulled from another server that aren't on your website. And that's the way a lot of things on your website work, where say you have a special font that you got from, say, Google, or you have certain types of coding or embedded coding, like say you embed a YouTube video and then you run ads on your website. When someone pulls your website, they're pulling the website from your server, they're pulling the embedded YouTube video from YouTube, they're pulling the font from Google, they're pulling the ads from whoever your advertising distributor is. You can't always control how other people's servers react, but you can control how your own server kind of reacts, and that's really important. But if you can't get 100% perfect site speed, don't worry about it. Like I said, it's a very fickle process. It's very hard to do. I've struggled with it, and I still struggle with it from time to time, because I'll try to add a new feature to my website. It'll slow my site down. I'll tweak it. It can be really difficult, especially for loading web pages on mobile versus loading on desktop. Most people's internet connections on their desktop say they're hardwired, or they'll have a more powerful Wi-Fi card, so it's easier to load pages fast on desktop versus mobile, where if the person's using their mobile data versus a Wi-Fi connection, it's just a lot harder. But I do have a few tips for how you can increase the speed of your web page to a point where it'll be good for most users. The first thing is to optimize your images. If your website is trying to load an image that isn't optimized for, say, the user's screen, like we were just talking about mobile versus desktop, mobile web pages and desktop web pages look a lot different. So having an optimized image is really important to make sure that it's the correct resolution and the correct size, where it can be served on your website in the correct format. A good way to go about doing this is most web pages use a theme for design. So take a look at the instructions or the tutorial for your theme, and most of the time it'll tell you what size and what resolution images you need. Also, a lot of web pages do what's called responsive design, where you upload an image to your website and it'll actually save multiple different versions of that image. Because sometimes your image will, say you're in a category listing for your web page, it'll show your image as a thumbnail, where if you're on the actual page itself, it'll show it as like a banner or a featured image, or if you're referencing it on another page, it may show it in a different size. So understanding how your website serves images and what images it needs to have them served properly is very important. Second is what's called lazy loading images. And this is the option that most web design, whether using like Squarespace or WordPress or Wix, they'll have a lazy loading option where images that aren't loaded until they're scrolled down to. I'm sure you've seen it before, where you're on a web page and as the web page is loading, you're instantly scrolling down, or you've been on a web page for a minute and you scroll down and the images aren't there, and then after a second they pop up. That's what lazy loading is, essentially. I should explain, when you go on a web page, obviously you can't see the whole web page at once, because you have to scroll down to see a bunch of it. That's what's called the fold. The part of the website that you get when you first load it is called above the fold, and then as you scroll down, that's called below the fold. It's a reference to when you're reading a newspaper and the newspaper's folded in half. You have the first chunk of the text, and then you have to unfold it to see the bottom half of the text. And web pages kind of work like that, where if something is below the fold, you don't necessarily need to load it right away. So not loading every image on your page when someone clicks on it is typically a better experience, because you don't even know if the person is going to scroll down far enough to look at that image. So why waste their time loading it if you don't even know if they're going to look at it or not? Load it if it looks like they're about to look at it, and that's kind of what lazy loading is all about. It takes some of the stress off of loading your web page because it's not trying to load every image at once. Third is minimizing code. As I said before, your website runs a lot of different code, whether it's, HTML, CSS, JavaScript. There are times where all the different coding on your web page just kind of gets very large and everything's interacting with each other, and it's really all these different types of codes just kind of woven together. There are certain things you can do to kind of compact the code, so that way when someone clicks on your website, it has less code to run. It's not something that you would typically do by hand unless you have like a really, really in-depth knowledge of multiple coding languages. However, there are a lot of tools available, especially for WordPress. If you're running your website off of WordPress, you can get plugins that'll minimize the code for you. Or if you're using a different provider, see what your provider's options are for minimizing code. Next is to use a good hosting platform. Now, with a lot of web design websites, such as Wix and Squarespace, you will have to use their servers. You give them your domain name, you use their servers, you use their web design. That's not the only way you have to do things. I know a lot of people use Squarespace and Wix. They're not my favorite personally, mostly because you don't get as much control as you do with other platforms. You can always get your own hosting server and then install your own designer on it. For example, I use Bluehost shared hosting, and I have WordPress on it. Now, the quality of your hosting server is very important. It's probably the biggest thing when it comes to loading your web page for other people. If you just have a very powerful engine behind your website, any other mistakes like in your coding or your images are still going to load fast if the server can send it super fast, right? However, good hosting is really expensive, so as indie creators, most of us can't afford it. I know I can't. I use shared hosting on Bluehost, so my website is on a server with a bunch of other websites. So my website can be slow at times if the other websites on my server are being utilized. Private hosting is better, but like I said, it's much more expensive. Take a look at what options you have. A lot of hosts have really good deals at different times of the year, especially around holidays. And you can kind of play it to your advantage, where you can grab some good hosting cheap if you wait for the right deal. The next thing is to use a good design platform. This kind of goes in with the hosting as well. With a lot of web design websites, you use their host. Like I said before, you use their host and you use their design, or you can get your own hosting and put whatever designer you want on it. Certain design platforms have more or less features. For example, with WordPress, you can download plugins for basically anything that you need, where other websites or other website designers don't have those options. So even though it may seem simple to build your web page on a website, say like Squarespace or like Wix, you're kind of locked in to whatever their structure is. So if you need something changed on your website, you either have to ask tech support to do it, or you have to wait for them to upgrade the website for everybody. And that can be a real pain if there's something that is dragging down your website and the person that you're paying isn't able to change it for you. That's why I prefer to use WordPress, because if there is a problem on my site, I can go handle it myself. And I know it seems daunting, but there are a lot of great plugins out there for WordPress that'll really help you. And a lot of them are just, you turn them on, they do their thing, and you're good. As opposed to having to wait, say, like a year for your provider to make that fix for you. Finally, I want to talk about using content distribution networks. They're also known as CDNs. Now, you can typically use CDNs even if you, like, regardless of what your hosting platform is, or regardless of what your design platform is. A CDN will hold copies of your web pages on multiple different servers. And then if someone goes to access your web page, it'll figure out which server is closest to them and serve it off of that server. Most CDNs cost money. There are some platforms that have a built-in CDN if you pay like a little bit extra, or some platforms have a free CDN that you can use. That's kind of important because you want there to be like the shortest distance possible between the person accessing your webpage and the server. Because remember, it's still running through either the air or through cable wires. It still has that physical distance that it has to travel. So you want your website to be coming from the closest server possible. And that's through the use of a content distribution network or a CDN. So finally, when it comes to Pagespeed, I have 3 tools that I typically use that I wanted to share with you. The first one is called Google Pagespeed Insights. If you type into Google, Google Pagespeed Insights, it'll bring you to the web page. You put in the URL of your website, and it'll give you a rating out of 1 to 100 on how fast your site is for both mobile and for desktop. Now, I will say here, getting the mobile score high is very hard. A lot of people struggle with it. However, getting the desktop speed high is pretty obtainable for most people. And a lot of that has to do with your image formats. I know images on the internet are slowly going from like JPEGs and PNGs over to like WebP. There's different file extensions that websites are using now because they load faster without reducing image quality. And Google knows this, and Google wants you to start using those next-gen formats. So make sure that your website has like the highest quality pictures, not necessarily the highest quality, but the best extensions on the pictures as possible. However, that's kind of besides the point. Using Google PageSpeed Insights will show you what you need to work on to make your website faster. And I like this because it comes directly from Google. Google is where you're getting most of your search engine results from. It's nice to see kind of how they view your website. The second tool I use is called Pingdom Tools. Pingdom is a website that has a free page speed audit, and it works really well. And what I really like about it is that they have multiple different servers, so you can click on the different servers and run speed tests, and you can kind of see how your website reacts when it's being pulled from different parts of the United States. I'm not sure. I use the United States ones. I'm not sure if they have servers in other countries that you can check out. But it's good because instead of just running a speed test from the same location, you can run speed tests from multiple locations, and you can kind of see where your site is at for different areas of the world or different areas of the United States. The third tool that I use is called GT Metrics. That's GTMetrax. And this is a really great website because I feel out of all of the page speed tools, this gives you the most in-depth analysis of what you need to do to get your web page running faster. Now, a lot of the recommendations that you're going to receive may seem a bit more complicated where you're at when it comes to web design and coding. However, most of the things you can search for, and there's a lot of great tutorials out there on how to fix a specific page speed issue. So that's all I have to say about page speed at the moment. If you have any questions, let me know. If you want me to do a more in-depth page speed episode, or honestly, if you want me to do a more in-depth episode on any of the topics we're going to cover today, just let me know what's up, and I'll do it. I'll help you out however I can. Okay, the second big topic I want to talk about today is site structure. And site structure is kind of how the web pages on your site are structured. I don't I kind of don't know a better way to describe it, but it's how all the different pages on your website interact together. If you think about your home page, it's almost like the top of the pyramid, and then the rest of your websites kind of trickle down the pyramid and they kind of interweave with each other in different ways. And having a good site structure is really important. It's good for your audience because it makes it easier for them to navigate your website. If you have really clearly defined categories and really clearly defined tags, and if you have a good linking structure, it'll help people jump around to different parts of your website that will be helpful to them. So instead of them looking at just one page and then leaving, they're going to dig deeper into your website, and that helps. You want people to be reading what's on your website. It's also good for SEO because it kind of tells search engines how your website is structured and how the different topics you discuss on your website are related to each other. If you think about, we're going to talk about this a little bit more later when we talk about keyword structure, but for example, say you're writing a paper about Twitter. If you were to write an essay about Twitter, what would you want to talk about in that? You would talk about your newsfeed, followers, people you follow, notifications, liking, retweeting, quote retweeting. Those are all things that you would expect to see in an essay about Twitter. Your website structure kind of works in a similar way, where if you have a website, say about cooking, they're going to expect to see recipes in your site structure, or articles or pages about different types of foods in your site structure. So it really helps to just show that your website is on point and organized properly. So the first topic with that is categories and tags. Categories and tags work very similarly, however, there are some differences. Your categories are kind of the main way that your web pages are structured. For example, on my web page, I have development, inspiration, productivity, resources, and culture. Those are my 5 categories, and anything I write is going to fall under one of those 5 categories. Those categories really tell what your site is about. Not only it tells both search engines and your audience, hey, these are the main things that I'm talking about. Tags are more about the actual topics of the pages themselves. They aren't as heavy when it comes to your site structure as categories are. Like, categories are like the main fingers of your website, and tags are kind of how you're grouping similar pages together. For example, I have a lot of articles on my website about The Walking Dead. My website's not really about The Walking Dead, so I don't have a Walking Dead category on my page. However, I do have a Walking Dead tag on my website. So if somebody wants to click on the Walking Dead tag in one of the articles, they can see all my articles about The Walking Dead. However, since my website is mostly about helping indie creators, I don't want a Walking Dead category on my webpage. I want my categories to be about what my website's about. So my Walking Dead articles go under culture because I use the culture category as kind of like a catch-all for nerdy and geeky things that I want to talk about, and kind of the fun articles that I want to write that aren't really about professional or indie development. So they all fall under the same category. However, my culture category has all my comic book reviews, my TV show reviews, my interviews. Not every culture article is going to be about The Walking Dead. That's why I have a Walking Dead tag, so if people want to specifically only read about The Walking Dead on my website, they can click that. So that's kind of how categories and tags work. It's really important to think about how you want your website to be structured. Now, since I'm a blogger, I kind of have different categories like that, where if you're an artist, you may have your portfolio, you may have different pages that show off the work that you've made. You may have a blog section where you give updates to your audience, or if you write about different things, and you can still have that structure. It's fine. You don't have to break it up into kind of like these lofty categories. If you specifically want your website to be about your work, I do suggest that you still have a blog section. and we'll kind of talk about that more later in the keyword section as well. However, just make sure that your categories are on point with what you're trying to show people with your website. Next is internal linking structure, and this is something that I see a lot of creators not doing that really needs to be done. I don't mean to be the strict dad here. Internal linking is very important, and it's something that I do not see on a lot of web pages, and it's really hurting creators' websites. You want someone to look at multiple pages of your website. We'll talk about that a little bit later when we talk about bounce rate. However, you want your audience to love your work and to look at as much of your work as possible. So if you have a web page and it doesn't have any internal links on it, if someone wants to view another web page on your site, they have to go back to your category page, they have to go back to the search bar, they have to go and find the other page themselves, which most people won't do that. Most people just go back to their search engine or go back to another website and find the next thing or search for the next thing that they want. Internal links will help guide people on your site to the next relevant page. I'm sure you've seen this on many websites where you're reading a sentence and a few words of the sentence are highlighted. And if you click that, it goes to another page on the website that has to do with the highlighted words. Like, for example, if I was running a comic book website and I was talking about Superman, and I say, oh, Superman is a DC Comics character, and DC Comics is highlighted, and I click on that, and it goes to an article. Here's my top 20 favorite DC Comics. So you have a link in your page that sends them to another relevant page, and that's really important for both your audience and for SEO as well, because SEO or search engines will look at the internal links on your page and check and see if they go to relevant web pages. They'll know that you're kind of discussing a topic in depth instead of just linking to kind of random things. They know, oh, hey, he's talking about Superman. He's also got this webpage about DC Comics, and they are linked together. So this person probably knows what they're talking about, or at least they know how these topics are structured together. So it's important for search engines. It's also really important for your audience, because you want your audience to keep looking at your content, and you want to show them content that is relevant to what they're looking at currently. Now, there are a few ways to do internal linkings on your webpage. One I already mentioned, which is highlighting a segment of your text and linking it to a web page that has to do about the text you're highlighted. Now, the actual text that you're highlighting in web design is called anchor text. You want that anchor text to be as relevant as possible. So if you said, oh, Superman is a DC Comics character, and you highlight DC Comics and then you link it to a web page about Marvel Comics, search engines are good enough to know that you're trying to do something sneaky or you're doing something wrong there. Also, if someone clicks on it, you don't want to send someone in your audience to a Marvel Comics page when they click on a link that says DC Comics. It's not right. So make sure that your anchor text is relevant to the page that you're linking it to. Also, another way to do it is, say you don't have a specific anchor text in the text of your webpage. What a lot of people do, and something that I do, is in between two paragraphs, I'll have a line of highlighted text with a hyperlink that says related or read more or something like that, saying, and then I'll put the title of the article, like read more, my favorite DC Comics, in the example that we're using. And that doesn't break up the text. Well, it kind of breaks up the text, but instead of having the link directly into text, you just have a quick line telling your readers, hey, if you want to know more about this, here's another web page I have about this topic. Now, if you only have a few pages on your website, it can be hard to find internal links, especially if you have links that, or if you have web pages that aren't really similar to each other. However, as you add more pages to your website, you'll have opportunities to go back and link older pages. So say, for example, I made that Superman webpage, and then I hadn't written that DC Comics webpage yet, and then a year down the line I make that DC Comics webpage. Then I can go back to that Superman article and put the internal link to the DC page. Now, you may not always think of that because it's kind of hard to keep track of all the pages on your site, especially if you're a blogger and you have hundreds of web pages, or if you're a very prolific artist and you have all these different pages about the works you have. A good way to do this is just to have a spreadsheet that has every web page on your site, and then just review it periodically, like every few months, and just say, hey, are there any web pages that I can link together? And going back and doing that will just help strengthen your website. You don't want to have web pages that don't have any links, and you also don't want to have web pages where no one is linking to it, or no other pages on your site are linking to it. Those are what are called orphan pages, where the page is just on your site and it's very difficult to get to, and there's no other pages that internal link to it. The rule of thumb is you want every web page on your website to be within 3 clicks away from the home page. If you have an older web page that doesn't have anything linking to it, it's going to be very hard for people to look at that page, because in order to get to it, you have to jump through so many hoops of either searching for it or clicking through multiple pages to get to it. You want people to potentially look at every page on your site, so having an internal link structure kind of feeds a relevant kind of cycle of web pages is really important. The last thing I want to talk about in terms of site structure is external linking. Now, similar to internal linking, you're using hyperlinks. However, external linking will link or hyperlink a web page that's not on your domain name. Now, you may think, why would I want to send people on my website to another website? There's a lot of good reasons for that. The main one, though, is you're probably not the highest authority on whatever topic you're discussing. If we just keep going with the Superman example, DC Comics probably knows a lot more about Superman than you do. So linking to, say, DC Comics Superman webpage is going to show search engines that you know what you're talking about. Similar to having a bibliography or a works cited page on an essay, you kind of want to cite your sources. Search engines know what websites are good. So, for example, if you link to like Wikipedia, or in this example, DC Comics, it says, hey, this person's talking about Superman. They're linking the Superman's Wikipedia page. They're linking to DC Comics Superman page. This person most likely did their research and knows what they're talking about. And these external links do help with your search engine rankings, because it's almost like submitting a paper without a works cited page. The teacher's not going to grade you that well because they have no way of verifying what you're talking about. The same thing works with web pages and search engine optimization. Alright, the next major category I want to talk about is backlinks. Backlinks are when another web page links to your web page. So we were just talking about external links. A backlink is when someone has an external link on their website to your website. And this is a very important aspect of search engine optimization. It's also one of the hardest things to pull off. It's very important because you can't really fake it. You don't have control of what other websites do. So if another website takes a moment to mention you and link to you, that tells search engines that this person's doing something right. It's also good for your audience, because if someone has a similar website to yours and they're linking to yours, part of their audience has a chance to click over to your site and now become part of your audience. So backlinks are really important because they can't really be cheated. There are some people who do some sneaky things. For example, there are what are called PBNs. I believe that stands for private blog networks. That's when one person or a small group of people will run a multitude of websites, and then they'll all link each other. Now, search engines, their algorithms get better every day, and search engines are getting really good at picking up when people are trying to do that, where you're trying to just backlink yourself, kind of patting yourself on the back as a way to get, like website street cred, but that's not really how it works. It's not really an honest way to do it, and search engines are getting good at telling if you're doing that. So I do have a few strategies on how you can increase backlinks to your site. A lot of them are time consuming. However, like I said, these are really important. Backlinks are a really important part of search engine optimization, so spending some time trying to get some backlinks is important. The first thing is guest posting. So finding a blog or a website that is similar to yours, reaching out to them and saying, hey, if you link to my website, I will write an article for you. Now, it doesn't always have to be that transactional. A lot of us in the indie world are friends with each other. We all support each other's websites. Donating content to another website is it's a good thing. It helps us kind of support each other. It's not always just about getting that backlink, but also strengthening our community by interweaving our content together and supporting each other's websites. The next is by getting interviewed, and that's something I try to do on my website. As I told you last time, I've interviewed 100 people for my website. I always make sure to link to their website if they have one, because I want to give them a backlink. I want to help their website's SEO bump up a little bit. My website isn't more popular than a lot of the people I interviews, but in a lot of cases it is. So me giving them the backlink is really important. The third thing is to just ask. Just find a website that's similar to yours and just say, hey, I really like your website. You have this page on your website that's similar to what I do. So if you don't mind, like, kind of sliding me in there, that would be nice. Putting a link to me in there. It doesn't hurt to ask, especially if the person you're asking does have a very relevant web page that is similar to yours. So for example, if you have art tutorials on your website, and then someone has an article, like, here's my favorite art tutorial websites, just reach out to them and say, hey, I do these tutorials. I see that you have a blog post about tutorials. You know, do you mind mentioning me? Or, hey, check out my website. If you want to mention me on the page, cool, thanks. If not, what's up? We're good. You don't have to try to force it or to be very aggressive about it. Just put yourself out there. Just be like, hey, I'm here. What's up? You know, you want to do something together. It's kind of like asking someone on a date. Not really, but another good tactic that people use is by finding broken links. So, for example, using the same example, say you have art tutorials on your website, and a person has a art tutorial blog post where it has a bunch of different websites that offer art tutorials, and you notice that one of the web pages that they link to doesn't exist anymore. The person shut down the web page. What you can do is send an email to the webmaster or whoever runs the website. Say, hey, I notice you have this web page and the link to one of them is broken. Would you mind swapping that link out for mine? Some of them will say yes. A lot of people will say no. It's a lot of back and forth with that. It's really a numbers game in finding people that you have relationships with or building relationships with people. It's just something you should be doing anyways. Like, networking is really important. Finding a broken link where you kind of can fill in the gap of where that link or what that link was doing can be a really easy way to get backlinks. The next one is to look for websites that mention you but don't link to you. Now, that could be, for example, if you get interviewed by someone and they don't link to your site, or if someone reviews a piece of art you did or a piece of work you did and they don't link to your site, just reach out to them and say, hey, I saw that you were talking about me on your website. Do you mind throwing in a link to my webpage? A lot of them will say yes, because, I mean, they're talking about you already. They obviously like you, unless it's some sort of really bad review you don't want people seeing. Then you don't have to really fuck with them, but a good way to do this is to set up Google alerts, or even just Google yourself and just see what comes up, reaching out to people. A lot of times people will talk about you on their website and they'll just forget to link you. It's not a big deal. Just reach out and say, hey, do you mind just hyperlinking my name or sending a link to my webpage on that page? A lot of people will do that for you, especially if they're saying nice things about you on their site. Now, I do have two more, and they have to do with bad practices for backlinks. Number one, do not buy backlinks. I'm going to say that again. Do not buy backlinks. You can go on Fiverr, you can throw $20 at someone, and they will give you 200 backlinks to your website. It's possible. You can do it. However, not all backlinks are the same. You don't want backlinks from websites that are scammy or they're low quality. You also don't want backlinks from websites that have nothing to do with what you're talking about. So if you go on Fiverr or a different website and pay for backlinks, most of those backlinks aren't going to come from web pages that you want linking to you in the first place. Like, backlinks is really a quality game more than it is a quantity game. For example, one good backlink from a really high ranking website, like say like Huffington Post links to you, that could be something really great for your website. And that's going to be way better than 100 links from say you do have a website about art and 100 links from, like, I don't even know. I once had a website, it was like a kitchen renovation website linked to me, and I was like, what are you doing? Like, it's not good. You really want quality backlinks to your website. And that kind of feeds into the second thing that I wanted to talk about, which they're called toxic backlinks. And a toxic backlink is a backlink where it's coming from a website that search engines do not like because they're either spammy or scammy or very low quality. It can actually hurt your rankings in search engine optimization if a bunch of really crappy websites are pointing at you. What you can usually do is you can set up what's called a disavow file with a search engine. You can say, hey, I know these backlinks are here, but I want nothing to do with them. I don't like them, you don't like them. Let's just pretend that backlink doesn't exist. You can add web pages, other people's web pages, to your disavow file to tell search engines, like, hey, I know that backlink's there, but I don't want to fuck with it. Just don't. We're over with. And that's really important because as your website grows, there will be low quality web pages that want to link to you because you are part of the authority on whatever topic. I actually had to disavow a few websites myself recently. I have a web page on my site called the Creepiest Pokédex Entries, where I wrote it for Halloween season, like last October, where I went through the Pokédex of different Pokemon games and I pulled out like the really creepy Pokédex entries, like, oh, this Pokemon eats the souls of dead children. You're like, okay, that's wild. So so I have a web page where I list all of those. And yeah, I found a lot of web pages linking to that blog post of mine, and those websites had nothing to do with anything that I want to be a part of. Not necessarily anything like illegal, but just these websites were obviously set up to pull in traffic, but they didn't really add any value. And I'm sure you've clicked on web pages like that before, where the title of the web page looks great, and you click on it, and it's just like hundreds of hyperlinks to things that don't even matter. And there isn't even anything really on the page that you want to read about. A lot of pages like that, or a lot of websites like that, started linking to that article, so I had to disavow them in order to make my backlink profile healthier. And that's really what it's about. It's just finding quality websites that are similar to yours, networking and finding an opportunity for them to link back to you. Now you can link to them as well. In a lot of instances, if you backlink someone and then they backlink you back, that's what's known as a reciprocal backlink, because you're kind of creating like a cycle. Search engines a lot of the time will ignore those because obviously, like, we're all friends, we're all going to help each other out. Like I said previously, search engines want to see backlinks from websites that actually think that you're good. So if you and all your friends just link each other, it's probably going to get ignored by search engines. So you really want high quality backlinks from bigger websites or websites that are very relevant to yours. And just linking back and forth with your friends isn't always going to help. I do have a lot of reciprocal backlinks, but that's because I love you guys. If I interview you or I review you, I want to link to your site. And a lot of you, share the wealth. And a lot of artists have like a news or a press release section of their website where they'll list when I write about them. And I love that. And honestly, that's way better than any backlink, because I want to tell people that I love your art. And I want the artist to say, hey, this awesome webpage wrote about me. And I really like the personal aspect of that, really, over the technical aspect of that. However, search engines probably ignore those, and they aren't really helping us from an SEO perspective. But who cares? We're all friends. We're a community. We're going to do this together. We're going to help each other, pat each other on the back, all that great stuff. So the next thing I want to talk about is keywords in your content. As we kind of discussed in the previous episode, a keyword is what you type into a search engine. I think in the last episode I said best chocolate chip cookie recipes, right? Keywords are good for your audience because as they read the keywords on your website, they know what the web page is about. It's not misleading. Everything is on point, on topic. And it's really good for SEO because SEO takes those keywords and generates a list of search results. You want to be in those search results, so if you use that keyword, you're more likely to be in those search results. There are some caveats to that, which we'll discuss. So the first thing I want to talk about with keywords is your meta description. Now, a meta description is the description of a specific web page, and you'll see it in search engines. When you're looking at search engine results, it'll have the title of the web page, and then underneath it'll have like a 1 or 2 sentence snippet about the web page. That's the meta description. You want to have meta descriptions on your web page, and you want them to be the correct length. I don't remember the exact character length, but you can look that up. Giving you some homework right now. It has to have relevant keywords in it. For example, if you have a web page about, say, the best chocolate chip cookie recipe, you don't want your meta description to be talking about bolognese, right? I don't know why I thought of bolognese. It's weird. Anyways, you want it to be relevant, and you want it to have descriptive words that really tell people and search engines what the web page is about. Similar to meta descriptions, your images and how you set up your images are very important. Most images have a title, they have a description, and they have what's called an alt attribute or alt tag or alt text. And you want all 3 of those to be really descriptive about what the picture's about and also about what your web page is about. So if you have a page about chocolate chip cookies and you have a picture of the chocolate chip cookies, you can have the title be chocolate chip cookie recipe. You can have the description say, this is my favorite chocolate chip cookie recipe from my grandmother. You could have the alt text of the image be chocolate chip cookie recipe outcome or chocolate chip cookies made from this recipe. An alt attribute or alt tag or alt text is what shows up if your website cannot load that image. So for example, you have some error on your website where it doesn't show the image. Instead of it just being blank there where the picture should be, it'll show the text, chocolate chip cookie recipe. It's also good for people who have vision impairments, who may be using a web browser that is specifically set up for their vision impairments, where it won't load every picture, or it won't load specific pictures, and they can still see that you have a picture there and what the picture is of and what it's about. So it helps your audience as well, as it does help kind of the technical side of search engine optimization. The next thing I want to talk about is keywords in your permalink. Permalink is, most of you probably know it as like your URL. So for example, effectivenerd.com/whatever my blog post is. Now, a lot of people just set up their permalink to be the title of the web page. So like effectivenerd.com/29 creepy Pokédex entries. You want to think about what the topic of your web page is, and that's most likely going to be what your keyword is. You want to make sure that your keyword is in your permalink. Some people also just have like the page numbered, so it'd be like effectivenerd.com/12. Don't do that. You want your permalink to say exactly what your web page is about. So instead of .com/12, it's .com/best chocolate chip cookie recipe, right? So it's making sure before you publish a web page that your permalink has a really good description or has your keyword in the permalink. Next is using relevant keywords. Some people call this LSI. I believe it stands for latent semantic indexing. And these are keywords that are often linked to the keyword that you want to use. So for example, we're going to switch up the example now. We're going to not talk about chocolate chip cookies anymore because I kind of want some now. But say you have a website or a web page about Batman villains, like the history of Batman villains, right? Your keyword for that web page would most likely be Batman villains. However, most other people that are writing a web page about Batman villains, they're going to talk about the Joker and Bane and Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy. Your related keywords, search engines want to see those on your web page. They'll say, all right, we have 5 million web pages about Batman villains, and this person over here doesn't even mention the Joker, so what do they know, right? like I said, it's all about user experience. So if someone's clicking on a Batman villain article, they're going to expect to see the Joker pretty prominent on that web page, right? So search engines know to look for that. The structure of your web page actually hits all those subtopics that you would expect to see under the main topic. That leads me into the next thing, which is using headings. I noticed that a lot of creators they will use headings. Like, it won't just be a wall of text as their web page. They will have like introduction, or like in the Batman example, it'll be like Batman Villains is the title, and then you'll have a heading, the Joker, a heading, Zaz, a heading, Bane, a heading, Harley Quinn, right? A lot of people will use those headings. However, what they'll do is they'll use regular text and they'll bold it, or they'll underline it, or they'll make it a little bit bigger. Don't do that. Web pages have specific heading text. I'm sure you've seen it in your web page editor before. They're called H1, H2, H3, H4. You want to be using those to structure your website. Imagine if you took out all the text on your website and just left the headings. Your headings should read as almost like your outline of what you're going to do. Or like, you ever seen those when like you're taking notes in school and you do like the notes where it's like A and then indent underneath 1, 2, 3, 4, B underneath, or you'll see it in contracts or policy a lot. You kind of want to think of it in terms like that, of like breaking up your web page into topics and subtopics and using the correct heading size. Search engines know that if you're using a header, it's probably very important. So if you have a header or header text that has your keyword in it, it kind of hits harder than if you just have it in regular text. So going back to the related keywords, a search engine crawler goes to your website. They say, oh, Batman Villains. He's got a header for Joker. He discusses the Joker in there. He has a header for Harley Quinn. He discusses that. A header for Bane discusses that. Looks like this person's knows what they're talking about. It also helps the people on your website too, because header text is usually bigger and bolder, so people will be able to see what your website is about. They'll be able to kind of skim and scroll to different sections. If someone's clicking on your website and they only care about reading about Bane, they can just easily scroll down to Bane. Also, if you're running a table of contents code on your website where it shows the table of contents, like for example what you see at the top of a Wikipedia page usually, table of contents plugins or table of contents codes will pull headers as the different layers of the table of contents. So it's also really important for that. Helps you, helps search engines, helps your audience. Using headers is great all around. The next thing I want to talk about is keyword stuffing, and this is a don't. If it was just easy enough to just throw your keyword on your page 100 times, then everyone would have a super popular website, right? However, and that may have worked in like the 90s. I don't know if you remember, like, if you're old like me, you remember going to a web page and at the bottom of the web page there was invisible text, and if you highlighted it, it just had like the same keyword over and over. That doesn't work anymore. Hasn't worked in like 20 years. Search engines know if you're trying to trick them when it comes to keywords. A lot of times what they'll do is they'll take the amount of times that the keyword shows up in your text and they'll divide it by the total word count of your web page. And if it's too steep, they won't consider it. Search engines are really good at knowing how many times you use a keyword and how many times a keyword like that would naturally come up if you were talking, or if you were writing something without having SEO in mind. They know how many times it'll come up. Making sure that you're using the keyword in the correct places, like your meta description, your images, your headers, your permalink, all the things we talked about, but making sure that you're not doing it too much. And it also helps your audience, because would you want to read an article about Batman villains that says Batman villains are really strong and powerful, Batman villains are blah blah blah, Batman villains are blah blah blah, Batman villains are blah blah blah? That's not fun to read. So a good way to get around keyword stuffing is just to write naturally, write the way you would normally. And if you see any opportunities to slide a keyword in where it sounds right in your writing, go for it. Or if you can think of synonyms, like, go for it. A thing I do is if I don't think I have enough keywords on my page, I go through and I look for pronouns, and then I'll change the pronoun with the noun that it's referencing. So I said, oh, Batman is really cool. He does this, he does this, he does this, he does this. All right, he does this, Batman does this, he does this, Batman does this. That way I can add some keywords in, or I'll do it the other way around. If I think I have the keyword in there too much, then I'll replace some of my keywords with pronouns. And that's just kind of like a real basic thing you can do. There are a lot of great tools out there that will read through your text for you, and they'll tell you if you're stuffing or not, which is really helpful, because sometimes you'll be keyword stuffing and you won't even notice, or sometimes you'll write something and there's no keywords in it at all, and you have to go find opportunities for that. I want to talk about two more things with keywords. The next one is keyword research. Now, keyword research is kind of an advanced technique when it comes to SEO, but I did want to cover it a little bit. Most people, when they make a web page on their site, it's because they want to make it, and it's just something that they want to do for their website. They want to make this web page. Keyword research is where you look at search engine data, and then you find topics that are good for your website that will also rank. So say you want to write the strongest Batman villains. You do some keyword research, which is usually you have to pay a company to do this, or you have to pay a company access, but there are some free keyword research tools out there. The last thing I want to talk about is the resources after I get through the keyword research part. But say you're doing keyword research and you find out that there are 50 million web pages that rank for the keyword strongest Batman villains. You find out through research that deadliest Batman villains only has 2 million web pages about it. Now, the content of your web page doesn't change as far as the article you were about to write, because you're still writing about the craziest Batman villains, right? Or hey, craziest Batman villains that may even have better search results, right? You look at how many people are searching for that keyword, also how many web pages currently exist about that keyword. In a perfect world, you'll find a keyword that has thousands of people searching for a month, and there are 4 websites, right? Keywords like that don't really exist unless they're like super, super, super specific. However, you really want to look for kind of that ratio where it's the highest amount of searches possible with the lowest amount of results. There are other things that I don't really want to get into right now because they are a little more complicated. And when I talked about keywords, I really wanted to talk about how you just put them in your web page and not really how you research and generate content off of keyword research. But I did want to cover this a little bit. And if you do want a separate episode just on keyword research, I would be happy to do that. It's one of my favorite things to do, especially when I have writer's block and I can't think of a blog post to make. I'll go pull a keyword or pull a bunch of keywords and go look at them and then go write something. And then that way I can kind of get over my writer's block while also knowing that I'm making something that's very helpful for my website. So in the example we were talking about, deadliest Batman villains, if you wrote strongest Batman villains and you're competing against 10 million web pages, you may not get ranked, and then that web page may not get a lot of traffic. However, if you write deadliest Batman villains and that ranks harder against, well, it's easier to rank for, so therefore you get like your web page hits harder and you get higher up in the rankings, that could bring you in hundreds of views a month. And all you're really doing is slightly changing the keyword. You're not really changing the content of the page. And then the other thing, like I said before, like when I have writer's block, is you can go look for a keyword and have no, like, in the example I was using about Batman, you already know what your keyword is and you're kind of just finding the best variation. But you can also use keyword research to just, like, go and just find keywords and just write about them. And that's something, like I said, I like to do when I have writer's block. The last thing I want to talk about with keywords is resources. A good one is Google Search Console. Like I said before, that'll show you data about your own website. It'll also give you some SEO information about the keywords that you rank for. So if you're not sure why people are coming to your website, going to Google Search Console and looking at the keyword list will show what people are typing into the search engine in order to get to your website. Now, like I said before, there are some paid tools, SEMrush or SEMrush, that people use. There's also one called Moz, M-O-Z. There's another one called Ahrefs, which is A-H-R-E-F-S. Those, they all cost about $100 or more per month, which is very steep. However, they also offer some of the best keyword data that you can get. As indie creators, most of us can't afford $100 a month payment to a website about keywords. what I did, like I do pay, but that's because my website brings in enough money to cover it. I would make a spreadsheet and I would write down every single topic that I want to write about. I would just brainstorm. See the brainstorming episode? Tick tick. Haha. Anyways, I would brainstorm a list of topics that I wanted to write about. Then I would sign up for a free trial of one of these services. And then I would do keyword research on all those topics. And then what I ended up with was a spreadsheet of thousands and thousands of different potential topics to write about. And then you just cancel. You didn't pay anything. You have all this research done. Not the most honest way to do things, but they're offering the trial. There's really nothing unethical about that because you are trying out their service. Like I said, I ended up paying for these services because I thought they were that helpful. Like keyword research is where most of the money comes from on my website. Obviously, I write about things that I love, and I write about creators that I love and art that I love. But the websites that I've made through doing keyword research are the ones that bring in money. So, got to pay the bills. You also got to follow your passion. You got to find a balance between that. So I kind of use keyword research to write blog posts that help me make money. And then that allows me the freedom to write about the things that I really care about, what I'm really passionate about. Obviously, it's not all about money, but you have your hosting fees, you have your fees for other tools and resources you use, you have your design fees if you have any. If you are trying to run a business, you have all your overhead. So you do need some money coming in if you are trying to grow your art or your content into a business or into a side hustle. All right, the last main topic I want to talk about is actually probably going to be a quick one. I'll let you go. I'll let you get out of here. I know the bell is going to ring in a minute. Class will be over. But the last thing I want to talk about is bounce rate and dwell time. So bounce rate is a measurement of when somebody clicks on your website and then they immediately, or not immediately, but they click the back button before going to another page on your website. So in the previous example, say you have the Batman villains article, and then you also have a web page for each villain. So you have a Joker page, a Harley Quinn page, a Bane page, right? If someone clicks on the Batman page from the search results, then clicks on your Joker page, that'll give you a better bounce rate. Whereas if someone clicks on your Batman villain page, reads it, and then clicks the back button and goes back to the search results, that gives you a worse bounce rate. What search engines are looking for are when someone lands on your website, do they want to keep being on your website? The other thing is dwell time, which I just mentioned. And dwell time is the amount of time that someone spends on your web page. I decided to pair these two metrics together because they do kind of go hand in hand. You want someone to go to your web page and you want them to stay there and look at what you did. You don't want them just hitting the back button and going and finding another website. You want them on your website. Come on. You want them to go to your website, you want them to look at another page on your website, and you want them to stay around for a while. Bounce rate and dwell time aren't really about how to draw in people. It's more of a measurement of how good are you at drawing in people, right? It helps your audience because people want to stay on your website longer and look at the information on it. So if you have your information set up in a way that's really appealing for someone, they're going to spend more time on your website. Having a good dwell time and having a good bounce rate is really just about how good you are at running your website. It also helps SEO because it tells search engines, hey, people are staying on the site for a while and they're checking out multiple pages on this website. This website's probably pretty cool, right? So there are a few ways where you can increase your, or at least attempt to increase your bounce rate and your dwell time. The first one is to make great web pages. That's really the whole thing, right? If your web page is really good, people are going to want to stick around. They're going to want to support you. That's really what this whole thing is about. You can tell search engines that people love your website versus just telling other people you love your website. Like I said before, people requested this episode from me because they were sick of posting on social media and not getting a lot of results because it's really hard to engage people in a very flooded market like social media. So I did want to do an SEO episode as a way to show you, hey, here's a way where you can get a lot of people looking at your website without using social media at all. So another way to increase or to have a better bounce rate or dwell time is to use multimedia on your website. Say you have two web pages and they both have the same exact thing on it, and one is just text and then one is text and it has a video. people go to the one with just text, they're just going to skim through it for the information they want, read it, maybe read the whole article, and then they're going to hit back or they're going to go to another web page. Where if you have a 10-minute long video and someone reads your article and watches 5 of the 10 minutes of the video, that's an extra 5 minutes on your dwell time. So that really helps with your search engine optimization because you're keeping people on your website for longer. Obviously, don't throw any video on any web page. You want to make sure that you're using a video that is very relevant. However, in our indie communities, there are a lot of YouTubers, there are a lot of video creators, and a lot of them are making stuff that is relevant, making content, making art, making videos that are similar to what you're going to be posting about on your webpage. Find similar people, you can embed their YouTube videos, or even better, make your own videos and put them in there. The same thing goes for very informative pictures or infographics. People love infographics. I love infographics. It's really great to just have like a lot of information and just like one digestible picture. It's really great. So if you take your website or your webpage outline and then kind of break it down into its main points and then turn it into an infographic, say with like Photoshop or Canva, you can have your article and you can have your infographic, and that'll help people stay on the website longer. And then the other thing is, we talked about this before, having a really good internal link structure. If your bounce rate is all about people clicking on a second page of your website, you need to give them opportunities to click on that second page. So that's really helpful, having really good internal links and having them be relevant and in the right spot and have great text and great anchor text. That'll help people get to that second page of your website. All right, so that's what I had today. I know it was, I haven't looked at the time, but I'm pretty sure this could be my longest episode by far out of all, 6 of them? But it'll probably be my longest episode for a while as well. I know we covered a lot of information today, so I really want you to reach out to me if you are having any trouble with some of the more technical things we talked about. You can actually do more harm than good if you don't do it correctly. So if you have some questions, let me know. As I said before, I do some freelance SEO auditing. So if you want to work out some type of deal with that, we can talk about that. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed the episode. I know it was a lot of information, but this is really the framework and the foundation of running a good website. If you aren't doing anything that I talked about today right now, if you go back and you do everything I said onto your webpage right now, you'll see an increase in traffic, but more importantly, you'll probably see an increase in user satisfaction, where people who go to your webpage will like it a lot more because it's set up correctly and it doesn't have errors and all the images look correct and they have a wealth of content to go to that are all linked to properly and it loads fast. Like I said, at the end of the day, SEO really is about giving the best user experience possible. Even though SEO is measured through data and it's a search engine algorithm, it really does come down to doing what's best for your audience and showing your audience that you're willing to put in the time and the effort to give them the best website possible. All right, everybody, just stay safe, stay healthy. Get your website going, get it fast. I want to see you guys having the fastest, best, coolest websites ever. I want to see you guys coming up in search results. I don't want to see BuzzFeed come up in search results anymore. I'm tired of seeing Forbes writing about video games. I want to see you writing about video games, alright? Nah. Jokes aside, go out there, make your website kick some ass. Alright? Peace. Thank you for listening to the Effective Nerdcast. For more information on how to step up your work, please visit effectivenerd.com. You can find us on social media at effectivenerd. You can also email us at effectivenerd@gmail.com. Effective Nerdcast is hosted by Aaron Yara. The theme song was created by MC Graffiti.